Hello everybody and welcome back to the Code Lab. This will be a short bite-sized video on how to create dynamic routes and static routes within Next.js 13. We'll tackle why you should use either strategies and a few use cases between them. So what exactly is a route within Next.js? It's exactly what it is. It's a route to a segment or another location to your web app. For example, you may want to route to your /dashboard or /analytics. You could also have child routes such as /dashboard/settings and so on and so forth. Alright, so in terms of routing within Next.js, there's two types of routes, dynamic routes and static routes. So how dynamic routes work is if you go ahead and make a request, for example, if you visit a web page called example.com/dashboard, your browser will then go ahead and send over a request to the server. The server will receive the request, build the web page, and then send it back to the client. In this case, it's the browser. Alright, so that's pretty simple. If you go ahead and visit this page, the server will build it and the client will go ahead and render it. If you go ahead and let's go ahead and type in a parameter with this URL, in this case, let's say dashboard1 or something like that, whatever it is, right? The client will go ahead and send over the URL with the parameter, right? Let me just draw that over there. The server will then fetch any data in the backend or the database using this parameter, and then send back over the data to the client. All right, so this is pretty efficient, but in terms of build times and loading times, it isn't always the fastest because obviously the server has to render the page, fetch the data, and then return it back to the client. All right, awesome. So now static routes. So beforehand with dynamic routes, if you visited a web page, your browser will send a request, right? With any data, any parameters, the server will go ahead and build that or render out that page, send any requests back to the database, and then present you with that website, okay? Or the data for that website anyway. With static routes, let's say, for example, you have web pages that don't need to be dynamically rendered, and you can build them when you deploy your website. On the server side, when you go ahead and build a production environment or a production page, you can choose to go ahead and build out static routes. In this case, dashboard 1, dashboard 2, dashboard 3. So when you push out a build on the server, you can build this statically. So that way, when a client visits a web page, right, the server doesn't have to render it, okay, because it's already rendered at build time. It'll just go ahead and serve you that page. All right, so you can see how quick this is because the pages are already built. Once you visit a page, the server will say, "Hey, I've already cached that. I've already built that for you. Here's the page," without having to actually build it on demand and then send it back. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Why static routes and dynamic routes are different and why you might use them. So now let's go ahead and build that out into the Next.js application. All right, guys, so I want to go ahead and create a blank, brand new Next.js 13 application. All right, so it's just a brand new Next.js 13 app, and you would just need to go ahead and clean it up a bit, clean up the CSS, and you're ready to go. Go ahead and create a route, create a folder, name it whatever you'd like. You would need to have a page.js file here or .ts. I'm using ES7 snippets just to make it a bit quicker. Name it whatever you'd like. The naming convention here doesn't really matter. But I'm just making a dummy post page here. All right, so this is just a static route, basically. To create a dynamic route, what you'll need to do is create an identifier. An identifier is displayed to Next.js 13 by 2 brackets, and inside it is a name of the identifier. Similar to the static page, you would need to create a page.js, and you'd name it whatever you'd like. Here I'm naming it a post. You could name it whatever you'd like. You can now deconstruct something called params, all right? And what this will do is deconstruct the parameter of the URL, and you can now apply it straight to the HTML body. Okay, so this could be handy for when you want to fetch dynamic data. So if you route to it now, which is post/2, you can see that the URL or the parameter from the URL is passed down and displayed on the browser side here. So you can see how handy that would be if you're going to use that specific slug to fetch data on the back end. All right. So now if we go ahead and build this application. All right. So now the application is built. You can see that there's a few legends here, one for being server, one for being static. The A symbol represents anything that is server-side rendered and rendered at runtime. All right. So when you request a page from the server, it'll build on the server side and then be passed to the client. All right. So now if you want to go ahead and generate static parameters, it's very simple. All you would need to do is create a new function called generate static params. And here, what you would need to do is go ahead and return an array of objects. Objects will represent the dynamic or the static route, that you want to go ahead and build. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and build 3 static routes, which is 1, 2, and 3. Be advised that you also need to name the slug the same as you name the dynamic route, which in this case, it's slug. So now when I go ahead and build this application, all right, so now that it's been built, you can see that there's 3 static routes here, post 1, post 2, and post 3, and that was built on deployment, right? So it's already built and cached on the server and ready to be received by the client without having to render real time. And you can also see here that there's a new symbol called SSG, and that's representing those static routes that we've created. We can now start the web page, and we can see the difference between dynamic routes and static routes. So you can see when we head to the static route that's been pre-built, the performance time is only 12 milliseconds, right? And if we go ahead and route to a dynamic route that hasn't been pre-built, you can see the response time is 166 milliseconds. So cool. So now we can see the clear difference between static routes and dynamic routes. Obviously, depending on your use case, you might need to use static routes or dynamic routes. If you have statically generated data, or if you have data that needs to be dynamically generated, it's all up to you guys. But this is the tools Next.js gives you that you guys can use. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Please go ahead and visit my blog if you want to learn more about this, and also feel free to join our Discord as well to speak to like-minded people. All right, guys. See you guys next time. Cheers. Bye.